The wind carried the smell of gunpowder and dust that evening, the kind that only comes after something's been taken away forever. He sat on his horse, staring at the horizon where the smoke of his burned ranch still curled into the sky like the ghost of everything he'd lost. His name was Colt Mercer, and vengeance was all he had left. They came in the night, men with masks and rifles, riders who took what wasn't theirs and left blood where peace used to be. His father had fallen trying to protect the land. His mother had screamed his name as fire swallowed the porch, and Colt, half dead, had crawled out of the ashes, swearing he'd make them pay. He rode out before dawn, with nothing but a six-shooter, a half-wild horse, and the fury of a man with no reason left to live. Days turned to weeks. He tracked them across rivers and canyons, sleeping under stars that never blinked. The world had gone quiet inside him. No mercy, no kindness, just the echo of gunshots he hadn't fired yet. Then he found them. 3 men. The same horses. The same brand burned into their saddles, the mark of the Iron Veil gang. Colt waited until nightfall, the moon lighting up the campfire below. He counted their shadows, breathed once and drew. The first went down before he could stand. The second drew his rifle and fired wild, the bullet grazing Colt's arm. The third, older, meaner, scarred, looked him dead in the eye. "You Mercer's boy?" The outlaw growled. Colt's voice was a whisper. "Was," the gun cracked, echoing off the cliffs. The outlaw dropped, and just like that, the silence that followed wasn't victory. It was emptiness. The vengeance was done. But his soul was no less heavy. He wandered for days after that, aimless, half-starved, bleeding under his coat. Somewhere deep down, he'd thought revenge would set him free. Instead, it chained him tighter than before. Then came the sound, soft, low, a hymn carried on the wind. Colt blinked through the haze of exhaustion. A small chapel stood in the middle of nowhere, light spilling from its open door. He slid from his horse, stumbled inside. A woman was singing. She stopped when she saw him, a stranger covered in dust and blood, eyes wild with everything he'd done. "You're hurt," she said gently. He didn't answer. He just looked at her, her plain dress, the lantern's glow catching the gold in her hair, the kindness in her voice that shouldn't have been meant for a man like him. "Sit," she said softly. "Let me help." He wanted to leave, to keep the ghosts company, but his legs wouldn't move. She cleaned the wound in silence, humming the same tune he'd heard from the road. When she was done, she handed him a cup of water. "What's your name?" she asked. "Doesn't matter," he muttered. "Then I'll call you what you look like," she said with a faint smile. "You look like a man trying to remember who he used to be." He stared at her, unsure whether to curse or thank her. "You don't even know what I've done." "I don't need to," she said. "Everyone who rides alone is running from something." Her name was Grace Ellison. The chapel was her father's old mission, long abandoned after his passing. She'd stayed to keep it alive, to help the broken find peace in a world that had forgotten mercy. And somehow, Colt Mercer, the man who'd buried his soul in vengeance, kept coming back. At first it was for water, then for shelter, then slowly for her. She never asked about the scars on his hands or the pain in his voice. She just listened when he spoke, and when he couldn't, she filled the silence with music. One evening, as the sun bled out across the prairie, Colt asked, "Why do you help me?" "You don't know who I am." Grace smiled softly. "Maybe not, but I know what you're not anymore." He looked at her, confused. "You're not lost," she said. "Not if you found your way here." That night, for the first time since the fire, he slept without nightmares. Months passed. Colt began rebuilding the chapel fence, fixing the roof, mending what time had broken. He'd catch himself watching Grace as she worked, how her hands moved with patience, how her laughter made the empty land feel alive again. He didn't say it out loud, but she'd given him something vengeance never could, a reason to breathe again. Then one morning, a group of riders appeared at the edge of the ridge. The Iron Veil gang hadn't died with those 3 men. They'd found him. Grace froze when she saw the dust trail. Colt's hand went to his gun. "They came for me," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Then let me stand with you." He looked at her, really looked, and in that moment he understood. He had left home for revenge, but somewhere along the way, He'd found love strong enough to fight for again. When the gunfire came, he didn't fight for vengeance. He fought for her. The chapel burned that day, but they survived. And when the smoke cleared, Colt dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he whispered, "I don't deserve this." Grace cupped his face in her hands, tears glistening. "Maybe love isn't about what we deserve, Colt. Maybe it's about what we're willing to become." Years later, people said the man who rode out for blood never came back. But on the edge of the prairie stood a small ranch, with a fence that never broke, a chapel bell that rang every Sunday, and 2 graves marked with wildflowers, one for the past, and one for the promise he kept.